Ready? Call meeting order. We begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Without that, Caroline?
Well, the purpose of this meeting is a work session with Baker Tilly on our comprehensive budget plan. I think they just passed something out.
Passed everything out to you. I don't have a visual for it, but those of you here in the room have a copy. What we have prepared is a comprehensive financial plan. We've looked at 2 years of historical data for you and then going out through 2027 to give you an idea of estimates of your financial stability of your funds going forward. I will have to say that your current budgets we received recently, and those are not entered here. What's here is an estimated budget. Since we know that those budgets that we received are our first run, they haven't been cut, they haven't been, we didn't, and plus we're still entering them in Gateway. We don't have those in here. So what you're seeing here would be your 24 approved budget, and then 25 is based on an estimate going forward. So the first section of the report, beginning on page 1, is called the executive summary. We start looking at circuit breaker and how circuit breaker affects the county. In general, Perry County has an 8.6% circuit breaker loss. According to the DLGF, the statewide average is around 11%. So Perry County is slightly below the average. And on the top of page 2, it shows since 2021, what the red portion at the top is what you have lost as a county unit, not as a county as a whole, but as a county unit to circuit breaker each year. And then the blue part of the levies that are collected. And those are all of your tax levies, not just your general fund. So that includes your health and your Cume Bridge and your other property tax levying funds. So over time, yes, your levies have grown. Circuit breaker has remained, from $413,000 in 21, where this year the actual number was $419,000. So not a lot of increase there. Going forward, 25 through 27, those are estimates. The pie chart at the bottom shows of all circuit breaker for all units in the county, that blue pullout portion is how much is attributed to the Perry County taxing unit itself. So overall, the whole count, every unit in the county, that schools, city, towns, township, libraries, that loss was about $2.5 million. Perry County's portion for 24 was 16.4% of that. So you can see the schools are the largest individual portion, or the cities and towns, there's multiple units there combined. So that's where you set on circuit breaker. Now over time, as net assessed value has changed, that's allowed your tax rate to fluctuate. There is an inverse relationship between net assessed value and tax rate. As net assessed value increases, tax rate to receive a similar amount of levy will decrease. So when you look at 2020, your net assessed value was about $595 million. Your tax rate was 0.6863, or a little over 68 cents, almost 69 cents per $100 of net assessed valuation. As your net assessed value has grown in 2024, it's now $775 million. Your tax rate is now about 0.6250. And keep in mind, each year there was a growth in your levy based upon that max levy growth quotient as specified by the state. So we don't have, the detail is back on some further pages. What we should jump into now is just sort of a brief narrative on each of your funds. And then we have a chart that shows what's going on with your balances in the fund. The first being your general fund.
Can I just ask one
You sure
question?
can.
So here we're in 2023, it was 762 million at 0.6119. And then we raised more assessed value at 775.
Slightly, I have to look at your actual levies. I'm assuming one of your funds, the rate may have changed. Let me look and see what that looks like.
Yeah, because I don't understand why that's.
So on page 20, it shows what those levies were. That was between 23 and 24. Let's see what fluctuated slightly.
I don't remember.
I think it's something big.
Reassessment.
So you're asking why the tax rate went up even though you're.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's
I'm
possible.
just figuring out, I want to know why that happens. Whenever
Right,
we
that's
dissolve
Is it
TIFs,
cumulative
we
capital
got more.
development? Or it could have been potentially too, if NAV, I don't know what that percentage is right off the top of my head, but if NAV grew by 1% and levy grew by 4%, that's not enough to counteract and see that net decrease in rate. So it's kind of a fine line as to if the rates of change are equal, if NAV goes up by 4% and levy goes up by 4%, you'd see a pretty much a straight line. But it's possible that if NAV went up by 1%, which is
Where can we see that? I think on page 20.
between 762 and 775. Because if you got 762,000, 775,000, that's a change of 13,000 or $13 million. Do you have a calculator there? Do some quick math so I don't say it wrong. The difference in change between 775 and 762.
You're right. 13.
13,000 divided by 762.
Yeah, it went up less than 2%. So your NAV went up less
So
than 2%.
yeah, so your NAV went up less than 2. The max levy growth quotient last year was 4. So in that case, the max levy growth was more than your growth in NAV. That's why you would not see the full effect, and you would not have had that full. You couldn't. You didn't see the normal effect, which would be, again, like I said, if they'd been equal, if your NAV had grown by 4%, also that tax rate would have remained fairly constant. But it went up because the levy grew more than the NAV. It's not specifically. It's not always going to decrease. There has to be that balance of how much NAV increases relative to how much levy increases. So that would be the reason for that.
And that's why we're seeing, not just in Perry County, but across the state, tax rates increasing over time and your circuit breaker losses increasing over time. It's because your budget's increasing faster than your tax base.
Can't be, yeah.
And that's what's causing.
And we're actually should keep it at the net, or at the,
We're going through your NAV.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
ideally, yeah, to not see the change in rate, which you can always choose to make that the case by how much
Usually
levy you, by how much levy you take, but normally you take advantage of the
We take
full amount
advantage
of
of the
levy,
full
but
amount.
yeah.
And most, I can probably count one hand,
people who,
who go below the maximum
Mhm.
levy because typically you need to levy everything you can just to be able to provide the services
Right,
yeah,
for your constituents.
right,
Because
I understand. I just was
Yeah.
worried about this. The trend was not.
yeah.
This
So
was off.
Is that explanation help?
Yep.
Though,
I
okay,
understand.
sure.
Sorry.
No problem at all. So we can jump back to page 4. We just started discussing the general fund. On page 5 is showing the general trend in those balances. So what we've done in the report, as I mentioned, we were using some estimated budgets for 25 and forward. That's roughly a 3% estimate. So a 3% increase in budgets, I should say. So based upon the revenue estimates, which we developed by looking at your historical receipts over the past 2 years, what you've had year to date in some of your revenue funds, and then tried to establish what we believe you would receive this year and then the following year, plus knowing what we know about items such as what max levy growth is expected to do potentially over the next few years. We are showing, again, not accounting for any huge changes in budget or any big decreases in revenues, that it shows your cash balances in your general fund on a pretty even trajectory for the next 3 to 4 years. So we can look at those estimates a little bit closer when we get to the detailed
So we're
pages.
going in the right direction.
Yes, so right now you're moving in the right direction of maintaining some balances, establishing some reserves, and potentially having some fallback for future if you need to. Yes, so on each one of these graphs, you'll see a red line, which is sort of a indicator stop, don't drop below this, and then a green at the top, which would be for a 50% operating reserve. We normally recommend 15 to 50%. If you can get about 25%, that middle of the road, that's a great idea. But if we look at any funds and they're down below that red, depending upon what the use of the fund is for, particularly for these funds where you're paying salary and wage, that 15 to 50 guideline is a real good guideline, because you don't want to cut yourself so short if you can't make payroll, have to get tax anticipation warrants or anything like
I
that.
think this SBOA code was 25 to
25 to
35.
35 is our goal.
So it's
Yeah.
in the same.
In the same range.
I'd rather be in the middle.
Yep.
On
And
the
if
low.
you remember when I was down here last time, we talked about the 15 to 50.
Mhm.
15% basically means you have enough money in the bank to cover 2 months. of
Yeah,
expenses.
well, we want to be more than
And
that.
50% is you're able to
Yes,
catch
roughly
6
6.
months.
And I know that at the end of 2023, we were at our general, we were at 24.89. So we are definitely an increase from the year before. And I think reassessment was the only one that was lower than that. And so all the rest of them were well
At
above
the end of 20.
at the end
And
of
23,
yeah, end of 23.
beginning of
Oh,
20.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
And next is where we're showing on your, is your reassessment fund. So some of these funds, depending upon what you need when, like particularly between reassessment and health, we see a lot of balancing over the years. If you get a little bit more reserve than you need in reassessment, you may shift levy in a given budget year over to health. And then you spend what you need to in health, and if reassessment needs some more help, you can shift back. Because each year as a unit, you have the ability to shift that levy around between your general, your health, your reassessment, so that you can make those changes over time. So you're still within those guide rails on your reassessment fund, anticipated for the next 3-4 years also. And then we see something similar, health. Right now for health, you've got a little bit more than that 50%. You know, you had the Health First Indiana funding kick in last year.
And it's increasing.
It's increasing this year, so when we actually get to aligning levy for the budget, you may want to consider pulling back some levy here. We'll make sure you meet the state standard, the required guideline to continue along the Health First. But it looks like you do have a little room here that you could pull back a little bit.
And
And again,
last year we did the baseline.
yes, we did, we made sure you had
Last year
what
we
you
did
needed
baseline.
to.
I said we need to call that.
Only what we need.
Yeah, so, you know, talk to your health department. When they present the budget to you, you can review that, and if you need to make changes there to realign, you
So there's
can.
room there.
Yes, there's room there to move some out of health department to give to general or reassessment if need be. Next is your cumulative bridge fund. I have to make a comment that it's very unusual to see maintained high balances in a cumulative bridge fund. This one, even though you receive levy for cumulative bridge, you cannot change the rate of collection on this one at will. This is set based upon a specific rate. It has been approved to a given rate. The DLGF has it set to that rate, and you cannot go above that rate without the reestablishment process, which takes place each year between January 1 and the end of May. So if you felt you came across a big project or you had a bridge outage or you needed to do something to get more money eventually in your cum bridge, that one you would have to go through the reestablishment process, approve at the county level, and send it to the DLGF.
But we're much higher.
But right now, you have higher than that recommended amount, which is usually not what we see. We normally see cum bridge being eaten up every year by projects.
So
So
that's also one where, a lot of times we'll see where you're accumulating funds
In
because you know
plans
you're
for
gonna have a big
because you have a
project,
plan,
because
yeah.
these are typically very large expense items.
Yeah.
So that's something, if you do know you have a bridge coming up in the next couple of years, we may wanna put that in here to see if we're gonna have enough
I
money
know
on
they have a
hand.
plan. They
Yeah.
have everything on a schedule.
yeah, so if you have a cum bridge, a plan we could look at.
We can get that.
Next is your cumulative capital development fund. This is another one that is this one is outside of the max levy, actually. Cum bridge is inside, cum capital development is outside. It's a separately adopted fund. It is again held to a maximum rate. If you, and I can't remember where you are on the max with this one right off the top of my head.
You said we're outside.
This one is outside the
Yeah.
max, but there is a maximum rate that you can apply to it. Let me look where we're at on that one. I think your max is 0.0333.
Yeah.
For county, it's 0.0333. Yeah, the municipal units have a higher rate maximum. So you are currently at, we don't have it on here. I can confirm that with Chris and make sure, but, it does show that you're using those balances, you're hitting about that 15%. This one, granted, you're probably not paying salaries and wage. This one, just by its very name, it's for capital projects, it's for larger projects,
Mhm.
building maintenance, IT contracts, sidewalks, those kind of larger expenditures. So a lot of times, again, too, we know that you're planning for these things, and then you maybe accrue a little bit, spend it down for a couple of years, accrue it again for a couple of years, just depending on what your project plans are.
We're like a little below that max rate.
Mhm.
If we were to go with the max, I mean,
That's the one we
create
were looking at,
$20,000.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot different. It wasn't a lot different.
Now, if we went to 5, it's gonna be quite a bit.
Yeah, but
But we're not-
unfortunately
we're
for
not saying-
counties, yeah, you're stuck with
Yeah.
that, yeah. But I will say that with that rate, if you've got it there, it would not drop again.
It would be locked in.
Yeah, it would be locked in. But previously, there was trending applied and the
Right.
DLGF would drop it slightly each year. They no longer do that. So if you
They
did
just
choose,
hold it.
if you did choose to reestablish it, you'd at least be there to,
Stay there forever.
yeah, it would stay there.
And then as
Till
your
they
tax
change it
base
again.
increases,
Yeah.
your revenue
Yeah.
would increase.
Yeah, because if net assessed increases, this is a direct increase due to net assessed value to that rate driven fund.
But we decided this year, you guys voted not to change that just for that.
We did, but
Yeah.
The
Yes.
only reason I was considering, thinking it is because it'd lock it in and then you'd be done. and
Mhm.
you'd
Right.
never
To be
have to
there,
do it.
right?
And
Yeah, your current rate's 0.0306.
Yeah.
So you're very close to
Yeah.
that.
What is it, 0.0306?
Yeah.
But still, I mean, this is another fund that's in healthy.
It's just, yeah, I mean, you're fine with this fund for what it's used for, yeah, fine. Next is your edit fund. Now, we know that you're considering later this evening some changes to this fund. We've addressed that in the last sentence of this paragraph. But until that is changed and adopted and in place, what we've built here is based upon the current scenario.
Mhm.
So if it changes, that blue trajectory would drop a little bit because you were considering shifting money from edit to other functions in lit. So this one is again, one where you have balances sufficient for your projects, your edit plan that you create. So you've got some balances here that you can use.
We don't have exit.
Yeah.
Really.
Every time going through these schedules.
We'll get there, yeah.
So we'll show you later.
What it could look like, yeah.
But this is based on what you have now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, this is
Gotcha.
based on your current percentages, not
Okay.
considering that
Gotcha.
change. We show some alternates in the detail.
Okay.
Next is your lit public safety.
Mhm.
This is one that we show potentially by 2027, maybe balances here decreasing definitely below that 15%. And that could be a matter of potentially you may need to move some expenses from lit public safety to your general fund or to some other fund where you would have the availability to pay for those.
We talked about that last year.
So, and in the past, I'll just say that when you receive a particular type of revenue, such as lit public safety, edit, it needs to be deposited in a separate specific fund and used only for those purposes. Previously, some of this money was being transferred to the general fund to cover expenses there. Actually, you should have transferred the expense to the lit public safety fund. So we worked with Chris, we've got that straightened out
We
going
did that
forward.
last year.
So that's been taken care of.
Well, we started this year,
Yeah.
we talked about it last
Yeah.
year, we started it the first of this year. And that was another thing where we were putting money into, where all of our lit now is going into 1112.
Mhm.
Where we did have instead of that 4917 with the jail operations.
yeah.
It all goes into 1112 with a separate line item budget for locations as far as commissioner
So if there
jail.
were budget items and other funds that needed to be paid for with that money, those expenses need to follow to 1112, rather than coming from, and like in this case, your lit public safety, your 1170, all the money from lit public safety should go in 1170 and stay there. So again, if you have expenses here that need to move to general or to another place, they can go there as well. The next one is your lit dedicated to PSAP. Again, similar to edit, we do know that you're considering some change here. That would potentially bring that blue bar back up above the red barrier line there. And when we look at the detail, you can see the potential changes in those ending balances that we've given. Next is your statewide 911. This is the fund that comes from, the revenue for it comes from charges paid on phone bills, basically. And we keep expecting to see these dip more, but they're apparently being supported some other way because as we know, landline phones are becoming less and less each year. And I'm not exactly sure what the calculation is, if anything from cell phone covers these. We tried to investigate
I think
it.
it's cell phone.
Some cell phone does too. Okay,
Mhm.
okay. So that's why they're not really dipping. They're pretty much, the revenues are staying constant for the most part of what we're seeing for most
They
clients.
talked about doubling it, even
Yeah.
from $1 to $2.
Oh, okay.
So I
So
don't
that
know.
would potentially be more, because not every county takes advantage of the PSAP lit. Some of them fund it specifically only from the statewide 911. So in your case, you have some balances growing there from that as well, but I know that's a very important function for the county. Next, we show the animal shelter non-reverting. This one is showing, but that's again, based upon current budgeted expenses for 24. This is a fund where you can really only spend what you have available. So showing this going negative is just a matter of educating the people in animal control to know that they can spend what's here, or changing the fees that would support this fund.
And we don't have a lot of.
This is the 25, or, the ask,
16.
the 35,000.
Yes.
The city's 35,000.
This is the non-river.
It looks like it's covered. It's projected to go down.
Yeah, we can see the detail. We'll get to the page with the detail and look at that. And we want to make sure that we have that, the revenue
I
set
have to
right.
look in that one, 'cause is this the one?
It's just set whatever they are at.
Yeah. I need to look at that.
It's Fund 1180.
Yeah, I don't think the 35 is paid out of this. This is just where we get that rent money, the only income we have
Oh,
going
yeah,
in
this is the
there.
rent
Oh,
money.
and this is
Yeah,
where
this is the
we
rent
pay
money.
the building
Right, it
stuff.
wouldn't go
So we
like
don't
this.
have income, regular,
Other than rent,
other than
fees
rent.
going in
Yeah.
there. Yeah, so this
Don't
would,
have
But that goes back
One
into the
income.
base for them.
expenses,
yeah.
and
Building
they-
maintenance.
we've spent a lot of money up
Yes.
there
Mhm.
to get it reopened.
Oh,
The
okay.
35 is paid out of commissioners.
Let's say this is.
Out of
That
general.
could be
Okay.
The
part of
30,
that.
not commissioners.
So
it's
this
paid out
is
of
just
general.
that, you're right, this is
Okay,
just
so
that
I'm
rent
right.
income. So
Yeah.
either
I think what
something
we
else
do
needs
is
to
we,
fund it or
Well, this is just for
limit the
building maintenance.
expenses. Okay.
so I think what we did when we get to the detail, I think we looked at what you spent for 23 and just carried that forward.
Oh,
Yeah,
And we
so
have
it-
done
so that
so much for that building.
Yeah, we had to
Okay,
bring it
so
back
if
up.
that's gonna come back, then
That's
that would
gonna
change
go-
that
that's
one,
gonna change.
definitely.
Okay.
So next is your local road and street fund on page 15. This is funded by a portion of gas taxes. This is more of a capital nature fund. You can't, in fact, cannot pay for personal services from this fund. So this is gonna be for salt, road signs, equipment, repairs. This one you have currently above those recommended balances, the recommended guidelines of the 15 and 50. Next is, the next two pages are your motor vehicle highway fund, because it is split into technically two different funds for one purpose, motor vehicle highway and motor vehicle highway restricted. Now, I know we're showing a decrease, but you see that ending balance is about 714,000 negative in motor vehicle restricted, but it's a positive 710 in motor vehicles, because they go, so, and a lot of times you budget for the whole amount, and then as expenses come through,
Transfer. them.
they get
Yes.
paid from where they can be paid from. You know, if they're applicable to the restricted side, you pay them from restricted. If they're personal service related or something, you know, again, salt and signs cannot be paid from restricted. It's only for maintenance, repair, and, of roads.
So in all, if you cross
Yeah, if we,
these over,
if we
we're
even
good.
things out, you'd be fine, because that's the net of, what they look at the DLGF and state board is the net effect. So you're very close to a zero net effect on these two. And, you know, the one's large capital projects for roads for restricted, so that's hard to control as roads deteriorate. Last is your riverboat fund. This one is one that we don't expect increases in revenues over time. We are showing your balance going up over time, but that again is relative to the budget and what you choose to put in your riverboat fund each year. We have just a few observations as you enter budget time. Remember to closely as possible, match your estimated budgets to the estimates of annual receipts. If it looks like something's not matched well, maybe you may have to wait, not include it in your budget, and look at it as an additional appropriation at some point later in the year. But try to make budgets that closely align with your receipts until you see that you will have enough receipts to support something if there's a question. Always review your counties. If you have basic overall fees, service charges like building permits or anything like that, review those on a regular basis. Make sure that they are in line with those counties around you and that they're covering the service that they're meant to support. If you currently have ARPA funds left, those have to be committed by the end of this year. That means via a contract or a purchase order with a vendor, not just listed in the plan. There has to have been actual contractual agreements in place for those.
And that's something that, in talking with Susan, that I found out, because most of these times we're just having these meetings where the ARP's committee is bringing it to commissioners are approving it. You guys are, then it's going to council, you guys are approving it, and that's kind of a done deal. We need to get contracts
Sure.
with each of these, and that needs to be done because there's so many that we've even awarded money back in 2022 that we haven't expended anything but we don't have a contract or anything, so
Just have to
therefore
have it
those.
by the end of the year.
By the end of this year and spend
But
by the
we
end
need,
of
I think that
26.
it would have been better if we were doing that
Along the
as
way.
we
Yeah, I
went.
agree.
And now, but now we really need to spend, that's something I just in the last conversation.
And it's not everybody, because some have already been.
Yeah, just the
But there are
ones that-
some,
Anything that was left as of the end of the year.
especially the new stuff.
And then finally, we would recommend that you put a 3 to 5 year capital plan in place. Write it down on a list per department where you plan for it to come from. If you don't know where it's gonna come from, at least get it out there, get it down so that everybody knows that it's coming and that you need to think about where it's gonna be paid for. And if you have to consider bonding or something else that can be out there, sort of an early flag for that. We could have included, if you had something like that, those sort of expenses could have been taken into account here, rather than just sort of anticipating what you've spent in the past and comparing it to that. The next 3 pages, or 2 pages, I'm sorry, are some of the assumptions that we use in preparing our revenue estimates that you see in the detailed pages, how we've allocated the property tax levy that you see in other pages. The max levy growth quotient, we know, we just found out it is for sure this year 4%. We are assuming 4% also for the next 2 years. We don't know for sure that's what it will be, but there was talk during legislative session this year that the state would want to limit it again. It didn't pass, but we fully expect it after the election to come up again next year. So whereas this year, the full calculation would have been 5.5% max levy growth, but it's limited to 4%. We fully anticipate it being limited somehow over the future
You're
years
just
as well.
being conservative by putting
Mhm,
4%.
Yeah, we didn't wanna show
I like that.
much greater than we would anticipate. The next section just shows how levies have been distributed and then how we distributed them going forward in the report. The last section there shows your circuit breaker percentages. You were about 11.1% in 22, 7.9% in 23, and then 6.6 in 24. And then we're estimating going forward those other amounts. We never know till a given year exactly how much circuit breaker is going to be. Until tax bills are calculated, we don't know what it will actually be. Then the next, there's some detail on the revenues. We are assuming any fund that receives property tax also gets supplemental taxes that are paid when individuals go to the BMV to license their boats, their planes, their trucks. Those are auto excise, commercial vehicle excise, and then there's also financial institutions tax, which is a bank tax. We estimate those in each of the funds that receive them at about 10.8% of the levy. So for example, if a fund received $100,000 in levy, 10.8% of that, we would think you'd receive it also for those CVET excise and FIT taxes. For most of your local type of receipts in block 5, being charges for services, court costs, fines and fees, we looked at historical amounts and created averages based on those historical amounts. We have some certified information for all of the lit items. There was 24 amounts are certified, 25 amounts, 26 and 7 amounts are estimated. We expect the state estimates for lit for next year to be out in August. Those usually come out the middle of August. Then with the final amounts coming out in November, usually after you've adopted your budget. So, yeah, that's great.
And then they might change it again in January, like they did in January.
Yeah, if they find something wasn't correct or couldn't be supported, So we'll start, hopefully, before you have your public hearing, we'll know at least what the preliminary estimate is for lit. And that would be your certified shares in your general fund, then your economic development, and then if the PSAP, public safety, or special purpose, or then if you add any of the other types of lit, that would be coming out at that time ideally. Local road and street, motor vehicle highway, those are sort of kind of flatline. We're not seeing big jumps in those in recent years. They're tending to stay pretty consistent over the past 2 to 3 years. So we basically, like I said, looked at historical earnings to determine what our estimates would be going forward. And the last box there shows the estimated budget increases that we used. Personal services, supplies and charges, other services and charges, we're estimating going forward at 3% each year based off of 24. If there's capital outlays, we're showing those capital outlays flatlined. If the capital outlays were inconsistent, like maybe they were 1 year but not another year, we didn't include those. So now we jump into some of the detail pages. So first detail page we have is general, your largest, most active fund. You can see across the bottom there, that blue line on line 40, that's what we're anticipating your ending balances to be. And then the peach line below that would be the operating balance. You know, again, if you're looking at that 25 to 35%, that's pretty much where you're setting in this fund for the next 2 to 3 years. So I will say currently, the budget that you've submitted, as they've been submitted, based upon a quick calculation I did today, is a little bit more than this budget that we're showing here. Knowing that you're gonna go through budget hearings, make some changes to that budget, some things need to be added, some things were moved out of that budget to other places, as we found out. So, you know, this is, you can kind of concentrate on the revenue section of what you've got here as sort of the guideline for what you should not, that you should be lining your expense budgets up to, this line 22. And each of the schedules we look at are set up similarly. We have a line with total operating receipts, a line with total operating disbursements, an ending fund balance, and then an operating balance percentage.
Which that's gonna help us so much in budget planning, because that's our magic number. If we wanna hit to be at that
You wanna keep those,
34.23.
Yeah.
Well, the
If-
34.23.
You actually need to come in a little bit less than that,
34.23 is the end of 2024.
would be this year.
And then we would be at 35.89.
If you've got similar budgets, yeah, for next year. I mean, the only thing I would anticipate that we might change is when we get that lit information, that would maybe change the revenue.
Okay.
But for right now, your starting point number is definitely around that 6.5. Now, and I will say too, there's a difference between 6.8 estimate in 24 and 6.5 because you got a lit supplemental distribution this year. That's another thing. We never know for sure whether you get lit supplemental or not. So we don't estimate those for 25 through
That's
27. If you get that, that's sort
So
of
just the
extra.
addition.
That's an icing on the cake, yeah.
So basically, looking at 24, let me ask this question. If we would spend, in looking at general, if we would spend every penny that was budgeted,
Mhm.
with no additionals and
No further, right?
no further, then we would come out at the 2.1 million, which would put us at the end of the year at 34.23.
Yeah.
For this year.
Because the revenues that we saw so far look to be on track. This is what you'd be on track for. I don't think there were any large questions that we had about anything or any big inconsistencies. So, yeah, you would be on track for that 34% at the end of 24.
You know, historically, we have gotten considerable supplemental distribution each year.
Yeah, that's,
But you're saying that could.
but you never know.
No.
I've seen units get
Like a
nothing
bonus.
and then $1.1 million the next
Right.
year. You know, it's, unfortunately, we can't, the Department of Revenue doesn't put out a quarterly statement, hey, we think you're here, this is how much you might get for your supplemental
For some
distribution.
reason, ours has been fairly constant.
In 22, it was 34,000.
Yeah.
And then it jumped up in.
Yeah, it went from
24
34 to
201,000.
168 to 201 this year, that's there on line 14. That's the lit supplemental amount in the general fund.
Well,
I don't
That would
recall.
have been, remember, it's paid a year in arrears.
Yeah.
So 22 would have been left over from last half of 2020, first half of 21. So that could have been because of COVID, potentially.
Possibly.
So that's, you know, because right now the money that you're receiving was brought in between the end of June 22 and 1st of July 23. So yeah,
That
that's,
201,000.
yeah, the 200, yeah, that supplemental amount and then the actual certified shares amount in the line above in 13. Above, those were all collected. And those monies that you get in supplemental are generally from over collections or late collections, I should say, businesses that don't turn their things in due time. And so they end up with additional to be distributed. And if they're not taken into the calculation, then your trust fund grows. And when your trust fund at the state gets past 12.5%, that's when they have to distribute it back.
And you gotta
To the
remember
units.
too, we changed in 2023, the amount of money. Remember, we had the poppers going into a separate fund where prior to 2023, that money was going into general.
Mm,
So that is a change
your
as a
revenues as
positive,
well.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
but keep this in mind, because as we get into some of the other funds, if you remember those graphs, we may have to move some expenses from
Yeah.
some other funds over to
Something
the
may have
general
to go in
fund.
there,
Well,
potentially.
I like the trend here.
Yeah, no, yeah.
It's a good thing.
Next, we show your reassessment fund. In this case, your budgets are pretty close to your receipts. For 24, your estimated receipts are 116,000, your budget's 122, that's very close. So for 25, you're very close as well. Not knowing again what that exact budget will be. And as we noted earlier on the graph, you're staying in a fine range in the balance for that one. Your health fund, this one's actually up over that 50%. But if you make some adjustments to this one because of the Health First and things that may be budgeted from there and that amount this year, that might change as well.
So this is kind of a good fun, not knowing how your budget conversations are going, but, I was in another county last night going over their comprehensive financial plan, and they're thinking about giving, pay adjustments, for this year, maybe next year. Well, they want me to go back and say, okay, if we gave a pay adjustment, of a certain percentage this year, and then also for next year, is that sustainable? Because just like this health fund, we're showing a balanced budget, but if you were to give, a 5% this year and a 5% next year, this will look drastically different. So that says you're putting together your budget. If you want us to incorporate that, we can, because it looks like you could definitely probably fund it for 25 and maybe 26, but then what does it look like for 27?
Can you sustain it?
Same thing for your general fund. That trend is very positive, but if you make some kind of adjustment like that, that could change that trend. So we can incorporate those kinds of discussions into this to help you make a decision for going forward.
Next, we have your cumulative bridge fund. See a little bit of the detail there. This one is, you're not budgeting quite what you're bringing into that fund. Again, if you have long-term plans there that, you're accruing that, that's perfectly fine too. Next then is your cumulative capital development fund. And this one, your budgets look to be slightly more than your receipts. So if you fine tune that budget a little bit or can shift an expense, you could get this fund closer back to maintaining balances or growing balances. Because you're slightly out of balance on the budgets there. It's not bad. The next schedule is your lit economic development. So here's what we'll try to explain. Down below the orange line is an alternative ending fund balance. So if the change that you're considering to lit were to happen, 25, your ending balance would look closer to 1.4 million as opposed to 2.1. So this is where I talked about that arc wouldn't go up quite so high so fast. It would still be, a higher arc, but it would be, because you're going then potentially in 27 from 2.7 million to, with the lit changes, about 839,000 balance. And that's not necessarily considering you would be making changes to your budget. If you make changes to budget, that would change also. So obviously knowing you have less coming in, you may choose to make changes
And
to
not including supplements.
But that doesn't include supplements,
Because
correct?
we get.
Yeah, you get supplements potentially on those, yes.
We have been.
Yeah, because that was a situation in 22, you didn't, again, that was because probably it was the tail end of 2020 into 21, but you did get them in 23 and 24.
But just, if you were to take this out 2 more years and didn't assume any supplements, and didn't assume that we changed our budget, we would have a negative balance going out to 2029. So that's why we wanted to
So considering some budgets there.
kind of show both.
But still good percentages of operating.
Based
Yes.
on current,
Yeah.
Based on.
Yeah.
And that's without supplements. I mean, I know we can't bank on them, but we've been getting them, so. But that's just gonna help have it.
Next is your lit public safety. This is the one that we said showed sort of trending down a bit with some of these expenses. So again, we're not showing supplement. We are not also increasing the lit. So if lit itself increased, that's gonna change the bottom line. Just we're showing lit currently flatlined here. So this is one that, once we know how much 25 lit is, that would give you a better idea of what, your goal budget should be for 25. And if you do need to shift expenses someplace else. Because again, it's not going seriously negative, but again, that's something you want to avoid.
I feel this is the fund that needs the most work.
There are personal services, from this fund.
This is the fund that needs the most work.
Next would be your lit special legislation fund. This is one that the rate has expired, but you have balances in this fund. This was the
yeah.
existing one that is,
It went away.
yeah, that has gone away. So you have balances here to spend,
For capital projects.
right, but you're not bringing in you did get a supplemental distribution because
Right.
they're, you know,
That surely must be the last one.
I would believe probably so.
I wasn't expecting it.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
a lot.
I wasn't.
That's really helpful.
I would believe probably that this
Brought
would
it up
would
significantly.
be the last year. So yes, you just have balances here to take care of capital projects then, yes.
So this is one where, you know, you're talking about your CCD and then your general fund and your other capital funds, that, as you know, this can only be used for the jail.
Yeah.
So any
No,
Did
capital,
they change?
This
it?
is, we changed it
Well, that's
July
right.
1st.
That's right.
We changed it for any county building,
that's right, I forgot you
Okay.
did that, yeah.
So yeah, so you have some availability here for
like a larger
projects.
project.
Yeah,
There you
next is your lit dedicated to PSAP.
3.1.
This is one that you're considering putting more balances to. So again, we have that special purple line there at the bottom, pink and purple lines that show what the alternative balances would be if you adopt the new lit as planned potentially. So yes, you're building balances here again with that lit. At the Public Safety Act answering point.
And you have that, yeah, alternative. Okay.
Yeah, we've got the alternative.
Gotcha, sorry, I was
Yeah, no problem.
thinking about something else.
No problem, that's fine. Next, we have your statewide 911 fund. That one, you actually have slightly more revenues than your budgets are, so if there was things, I know they're very specific about what you can use those funds for.
Yeah.
So if there's something more that fits in here, you have some room there. Next is your animal shelter reverting, then, yeah, we're just showing what you spent last year, so we should have dropped that budget back. That would make that one look better. Because at least to not more than your rental fees coming in, to at least maintain that $60,000
Yeah,
balance
that
that
was
was
like an
there.
initial, get it up
Yeah,
to speed,
yeah.
and then routine maintenance.
Yeah. So they would just go from that. So we can,
Kind of match the expenses with the revenue going forward. if you want us to.
yeah. This is the draft, so
It's
we,
probably better than it really was.
yeah, it'll be better
It's not gonna be
than
yearly like that.
Yeah.
I hope not. Plus it is a county building and we do have another fund for that,
Yeah.
in case something would happen.
You do have that now, it's true. Next just shows your local road and street fund. This one, your budgets are a little bit more, so you're using some of the reserves there, but again, that's dependent upon your capital project needs. And then as we pointed out, the next two pages are your motor vehicle, highway, motor vehicle restricted. One positive balance is almost equal to the other negative, so it's just a matter of controlling where those funds come from, going through the budgets going forward.
The only thing I would caution is, I mean, next couple of years are still pretty healthy, but it looks like a lot of these expenses are kind of
Yeah.
operational.
Yeah, so watch
So-
raises and things like that because you are limited, you can use the unrestricted for anything. So you can pay for capital projects from unrestricted, you can pay for road repairs from unrestricted, you can't go the other way, you can't use restricted and pay for people, it has to be capital. So that's the only sometimes that it's causing a problem for counties and they're coming up with an imbalance. Their expenses are growing more on the personal
Yeah.
services side than on the capital project side.
A lot of knowledge of knowing that and how that works is out there at the highway right now. So I know that I love Steve, but I know he's getting to be, he's thinking of retirement these days, so I worry about that because
Well,
there's
we
so
need to
much
consider
knowledge out there, yeah. But they manage the highway restricted roads, not restricted really well.
Then next
They
we
know
have
their fees and.
your riverboat fund here. I wouldn't expect to see balances go more than the 47,000. I actually think maybe it might be closer to 40,000 this year. We did an estimate based upon what had been so far this year. So this one, you want to keep your budget close to, I think probably within the $40,000 range. It was at 55, and then they changed some legislation and took more away from the units that don't have actual physical.
But we have a good, healthy cash.
Yeah, you have a
balance.
cash, yes, you do have a
Very
cash,
healthy
you have a cash balance there, you have for projects and things, yes, you do have some cash there, definitely.
I just think there's some that I feel like it's like a grab bag. it doesn't have a real purpose, like we don't have a plan for it, it's just like, grab it out of there.
I'd like to start
Don't like
paying, like I budget my consulting out of there. I think that should be kind of like our consulting, our software. We pay software out of there. That's where we paid for Baker Tilly this year. I would like to see us not just do this as a one-year thing and budget out of there for that kind of stuff. But yeah, I
I
agree
would
with
like to be
that.
intentional with it.
Yes.
The next page shows your rainy day fund. You don't have much there in the way of balances. If you got to the point that you considered that, so adding anything to your rainy day fund has to come directly from your general fund.
Okay.
There is through the end of this year, there's a 15% limitation, 15% of your approved budgets. After the end of this year, it reverts back to 10% of your approved budgets.
And once we get that 25 to 30, which we're right at
If you can get
25,
that, you can
then
start
if
looking
we
at.
get to that, then start moving. If
Can
there's,
we budget for that, make that like a budgeted item?
You can
where
make it-
We are just gonna, whatever percent we would decide, we're just putting it in
You
there.
can,
or
Until
you
it
can
gets up
do,
to a certain amount.
you can do an ordinance or something at the end where if you want to just leave 35% of your operating budget in general, anything above 35 at the end of the year moves to general.
Like, after
You mean
your,
the rainy day?
after your,
After
yeah,
regular-
after your annual report's
After your
complete, and you
report,
know
yeah.
where you're at, if anything over that.
How do other counties do that? I'm
That's what a
just
lot of
curious.
them do.
That's how a lot of them do it. Some of them put their supplemental
Do they make it like a
distributions.
line item for like?
Not
like we're gonna-
usually,
Most of it's ordinances for the end of the
and
year.
also it has to be approved via transfer. So even if you put it in your budget, the DLGF won't consider it because there has to be an ordinance in place to do it first.
Okay.
So could make it in your notes. You could have it, in your local budgetary consideration
After your,
after your
Yeah,
annual
In
report.
March,
Yeah, yeah.
I'll have to look at that.
See what your-
Just to,
Operating balances.
But we're getting to a healthy point. I mean, that's what the positive is. I mean, we ended at 24.19, that's 0.89, but 24.19, we're projected to be closer to 35 by the end of this year. So we can sustainably move some of that.
I would like to, because it's so low. I mean, I don't know what you see in other areas, but it doesn't make me comfortable.
No, I mean,
At all.
honestly, a lot of places are in similar situation. The places that have more have been very intentional
Yeah.
about those transfers.
I think we can do that.
So that's definitely something, consider. The last two schedules we have are ones, the 4E Public Defender Fund and the Pauper Public Defender Fund. I know those have been a concern for Chris. That's why they're here. We may need to make some adjustments to what we're showing here for receipts, disbursements.
I think these funds right here, I think, I would say my mistake in 2023 of not putting our pauper reimbursement into general was a blessing in disguise because it allowed us to build up a balance in there. We just got another transfer in there, and I think this is a huge answer to take relief off the general fund as far as for pauper. It gave us a good start.
And there's something with legislation that has with misdemeanors that they're gonna pay up to 40%, I think, of misdemeanors. So that'll be helpful, because we weren't getting anything before, and there's a lot of.
So,
Does that account for that? actually, or-
No, that does not.
Okay.
If that's something you need estimates on, we're glad to put that in
I
there.
mean, I don't know how
we
you
just got our
I don't
second
know
quarter.
either.
You go by how many misdemeanors we have.
Yeah.
Like, I
We
mean,
anticipate how many misdemeanors you have
So
in the
these
county.
funds are definitely positive funds that I just want us to,
Chris, how much was that second quarter reimbursement?
close to 56,000. I've got the additional, I did all the paperwork today. That will be it, that transfer, because remember what we're doing is as I get that money, we're appropriating it. So as we get the bills, we can move in. So that will be at the August meeting.
At some point, if we would catch up, we can pay back what we've taken out of other things from additional appropriations. I don't know if we'll ever catch up.
Things like what we've taken out of general for pauper.
We've
Like
always,
additional.
we've always budgeted some money, it's just we were.
It was
putting
just being put in general. So now it's like,
You can
it's
track.
cleaner.
Yeah.
You're
To see
putting this
what-
much in
what's
there and you're taking this much out instead of just going into general.
Much
It
easier
should help
to
at
track.
budget time to see
I would
what's
like to do that
actually-
with a lot of other things too, we're just moving slow. Just where you get that cleaner picture instead of just throwing everything in general. It's easier to look when you've got the fund
And
and do that, yeah.
shows you where
Yeah,
where you're at.
that's what's intended for, too.
So that finalizes the cash flow schedules that we have. The last portion of the report, the first section is just sort of giving a brief explanation of what your funds can be used for, what they are and You see there's a large block there under CCD that you can use it for. General is sort of considered just that. You can use it for any legal purpose of the county. So that's why oftentimes it's a catch-all for things that can't be funded from other revenue sources or when other revenue sources have shortfalls. So we tried to include a description here for each of the funds that we have currently in the report. Page
Are
4.
these from state statutes or what?
A lot of them are from state statutes, some of them, obviously, from your, we had to look, sort of do a little bit of research on your non-reverting animal control fund.
Okay, so
Some
some
of
are
those,
local ordinance?
some are from local ordinances, yeah. So they're either
Is that
local
like home
ordinance
rule?
or state statute, yeah, if they're home rule. And some of them, are commonly used home rule funds, so there are some statutes or other explanations that we have for those, and you know what they can be used for. So we tried to fill those in.
And this is all of them?
And in the report, not every single fund on your books, you have a lot more funds than this with other
And that's
specific
what I
purposes.
will be working.
To get the rest of these? I think that's helpful. So then we
I
can
think
look
that
at-
blue line 22 is really gonna help us a lot.
And knowing what things can be spent from what funds during budget time helps too, because we always, make sure that you're utilizing, if you have special funds for something, that can be used if maybe instead of your general fund, even if for a year or two, that can be helpful. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. We are showing here your current lit allocation, knowing on page 40, knowing that might change.
One thing that we didn't, hit on, and I don't know what the history has been
43.
for the county, but as you're thinking about, trying to maintain certain ending balances like that 35%.
Yep.
I think this is also gonna be a good, useful tool throughout the remaining part of the year, because if you think about, each additional appropriation that you have between now and then, it's gonna impact your ending balance, which is gonna impact your potential budget for next year. So you can better keep track of it by kind of referring to this when you have something, in front of you to approve or not.
And this is just a draft. So
Yes,
we still-
Yes, we'll still get your actual budget in here, any other additionals that come up between now and
Any
budget
rate
time.
changes?
Rate changes will be taken into account,
I was worried
new
about that.
funds would be taken, would be put in here.
We'll dive more into, I'm getting into like the 4B, where you're getting like each fund's and estimated revenue compared to the proposed budget and where we sit on those, and then the projected ending balance. We just have so many funds right now that are in the 100% of estimated value, and I just like to really dive into, okay, is there some things that we can pay out of those to help build the general, even if it's not, I don't wanna sit here and say, yeah, I don't wanna do it, but to build that general up to where we'd have a percentage to move to the rainy day.
For like short term.
Short term.
You could do a year or two,
Yeah.
like you said. I'm
Because
okay
there's
with
some
that.
of them that there's cash just sitting in there and we're just spending the revenue, so the cash is just sitting there. But if we can, not a sustainable thing, but
Yeah.
take some things off to build that general up just for a short period of time and then be able to build the rainy day. So long-term goals and short-term goals. That's what we're looking at.
Non-reoccurring.
Like, for example, the county I worked with, they had some clerk money available. They needed to put in some new bookcases to store all of their books, their big documents. They were able to do that one time with some of the clerk special money that they had. Took it out of the general fund or CCD fund for the year. So those kind of things are worth considering. The next two,
You might have ideas for us too,
Okay.
from other counties that you've worked with,
Sure.
that we might not think of.
Sure. The next two pages show basically your budget to actual for the last 2 years. We show what the budget was that was adopted and what was spent. So generally, when it shows something is over budget, you had additional appropriations
Yeah.
that came in over the budget you approved. So you'd say normally if you're like in the 90, 95-ish to 100% of your
But
budget.
there's a very large crowd here and we cannot hear you. Would there be, is there any way that you could stand up or speak louder or something so that everyone can hear?
This isn't the meeting,
This
this
is
is a work session.
This is a different meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So 23 here, showing any additional appropriations. If your budgets are around your main operating funds, 95%-ish to 100%-ish, those are usually, good budgets. Sometimes random things happen, you can't always anticipate that. The final schedule is a summary of ending balances. So that last line of every fund that we went through previously and all the other pages, we put them here on one page to show you all of those together.
And you said
Very
it
detailed.
is, I
Well,
could
good.
take it home. Really dive into it.
I wish I could build something like this, this is really nice.
You know, and as you have questions, feel free to contact us directly.
Someday I'll
And
build
this
it.
is supplements.
This is just those ending balances,
Okay.
yeah, as we're shown on the other schedules, kind of puts everything like in one place to show you, you know, if you wanna say, well, you know, where, if I look at public safety, yeah, maybe what can we do, you know,
Yep.
general fund. So just sort of a one-stop shop for you to look at each of those anticipated ending fund balances going forward.
And for the public, we just received this today, so I will make this public on our
If the rates
website.
change, you'll quickly be able to plug those in, resend this to us,
We can-
because it-
We can plug those in and update drafts, we can, then there's other budget
we don't wanna look
information.
at what I'm really.
Yeah, there's other budget
I wanna look
information
at
I
this,
can let Chris along the way and, so, yeah, we can do that.
After August first, we'll have more
Mhm.
information and
Yeah.
we'll roll out the next stuff.
Yeah.
August is when you guys kind of need to start moving and getting the expenditures, lined out.
And like middle August is when I said we'll probably get lit estimates for next year for your certified chairs and so.
So do you think August, will we, once you go through those meetings, we'll have kind of budgeted numbers, we can update this at that
Yeah,
time?
I mean, what Susan, what we had talked about was kind of was the plan was we were gonna meet tonight, kind of get the preliminaries. Then we've got all of the budget requests in, so then they can kind of go over
Mhm.
each of those,
Yeah.
through August and to be honest, I feel it's gonna take a lot of stress off of the September workshop. Cause I think that's just way too much to do in 3 days. I've been here 2 years and there's so many times where it's, well, we need to do this, we need to do this. Well, these 3 days is not the time to be talking about what we need to do, we gotta do. So this August will give you time to, you know, kind of get plans, not only look at 2025, but looking towards the year's future. And really just working with the department heads on what are their goals for their departments. You know, primarily, you know, the highway and all that, you know, what are the preliminary plans for ongoing, so. Definitely, I'm excited that we're starting budget, in July instead of waiting till September. And Baker Tilly has been a great source of, knowledge and expertise, but as far as our financial standing, I mean,
I think there's a couple funds I think you need to watch.
Yep.
Be conscious of, you know, long-term recurring costs that are increasing. But right now, your foundation at this point in time looks good.
Yes, trend's going in the right direction.
The trends are going correctly. So, yeah, you know, so that's just, keep your eye on the prize.
Thank you.
That's the goal.
There's some extra.
Okay, thank you.
Other commissioners and people that weren't here, so.
And can you email this to us?
I have it,
I have it.
she gave it to me today, so I'm gonna put it on the website, just so people.
And then if it changes, then
Yep,
you'll.
we'll
Yep,
update
we'll
it.
just keep it updating.
We'll be sending you the electronic copy.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
can pass it out.
And if we have
Thank
any,
you, guys.
You're very welcome.
Okay,
You're
thank
very
you.
welcome.
and if we come up with any
Thank you very much.
questions in between. we
Oh,
can-
sure, go ahead and contact us directly or through Chris or however.
Is your information on here?
I'll send it to you.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll send it, because we usually put it on, but this one I didn't, so.
okay, it's all right. She'll get it.
She can get it quick.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, we're gonna end this, take a one or 2 minute break.
Can't keep adjourn this and the meeting.
Reset up.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to keep adjourned.
Second.
Second call, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Jake, you got that safe trip home?
I'll stick around for this meeting.
Okay.